Welcome everybody to a soggy Spa-Francorchamps circuit here in Belgium, where we're about to make Intelligent Money British GT Championship history with the first ever live broadcast of a free practice session. The second free practice session of the weekend here at Spa is actually just getting underway now, with cars heading out onto the circuit. It is great to be back here in Belgium. We unfortunately had to skip this round a year ago. However, the weather has, unfortunately, as I'm sure a lot of you are already aware, not been great in this part of the world. And as you can see there, the rain is now falling fairly heavily. It's still warm. It's that humidity that's the issue. 87% humidity, and the rain, we believe, is set in for the rest of the day. It's going to make conditions pretty treacherous out there. You can see visibility is going to be at a real premium out on circuit. And in this free practice session, there is an awful lot to lose. You would think maybe not a huge amount to be gained, but the teams are also aware of the fact that tomorrow we could have a wet race, and so any wet running they get now in this session could prove beneficial as we move into the 2-hour race tomorrow afternoon. It's a busy day. They've already had one 60-minute free practice session in the dry conditions earlier on this morning. They'll have another 60 minutes now in the wet. Qualifying is coming up at around about 4 o'clock local time this afternoon, and then a warm-up and a 2-hour race tomorrow. All of it broadcast live, so you won't miss a thing here from this round, the fourth round of the Intelligent Money British GT Championship. Cars, as you can see, out on circuit. Then the Academy Motorsport Ford Mustang we're following, which was pretty handy actually in the GT4 category in free practice one. They were the third fastest of the GT4 cars. Fastest overall in GT4 was the Toyota Gazoo Racing UK Toyota GR Supra of Scott McKenna and John Ferguson. In GT3, it was Barwell Motorsports, Leo Machitsky and Dennis Lind who set the lap time, who were fastest in that session. Teams then now getting to work on their wet setups. They did have a little bit of practice time. Some of the teams did, at least yesterday afternoon, but that was, again, in sunny, dry conditions. Yesterday it was glorious here, actually. Temperatures in the mid to high 20s, bright sunshine all day. What a difference less than 24 hours can make. There's the number 6 Mercedes, which is our first visitor to the escape road there, and that was up at turn number 8. And in the car at the moment is actually Jelmer Berman. So even Jelmer Berman, with his wealth of experience all around the world, but here at Spa especially, running into difficulties there, just got his braking wrong into that really tricky downhill braking zone, and ended up running wide onto the thankfully fairly vast tarmac runoff area. Spa, of course, these days an awful lot more forgiving than it once was. Back in the day, if you go off, there are acres of tarmac runoff area to catch you, but unlike some other more modern circuits, it still retained an awful lot of its charm and its sort of rustic feel when you come here and visit the circuit, as we've been lucky enough to do this weekend. You drive in and you can just sort of see bits of the track sticking up above the tree line, and it really looks like the forest is sort of taking over the racetrack. It is a remarkable place. You can see there just some of the greenery around, and in amongst it all, the roar of the Mercedes AMG. Then this number 6 car had a decent time of it last time out at Donington Park. They finished second in our most recent race. Yet to win this year though, Jelmer Berman and Ian Logie. They arrive here though joint championship leaders with Johnny Adam and Andrew Howard. But the first bit of news to give you is that unfortunately there is no Johnny Adam this weekend. Andrew Howard is here. He's got Ross Gunn alongside him though. Johnny Adam, unfortunately, because of COVID-related protocols, is not able to be here. So he is self-isolating back in the UK. Can't race with us here at Spa, which means that Johnny is back in that really weird position where he is going to rejoin us later in the season, but now unfortunately his particular championship hopes have rather vanished. Also in trouble this morning were Team ABBA Racing, and Bryn Lucas is down in the pit lane now with Sam Neary.
Yeah, I am indeed. As you were saying at the start of this, Andy, this is sort of groundbreaking, the first time that a practice session has been brought from Spa, and unfortunately Sam and Richard aren't out on track. So Sam, talk us what's going through your car really, what the repair is, what the damage is.
Yeah, just cosmetic at the minute from what we looked. We need to string it up and check. Unfortunately at the end of FP1, the track started to get a little bit wet and I was on a new tyre run and I just made a mistake really. You know, it's bound to happen at some point when you're racing. You know, just feel sorry for the team. You know, I'm getting in do a bit of rushing up, and hopefully we'll be out for quali, which we look like we will be.
You say superficial, but there is a lot of components being changed over in the front end, so is it a case of replacing out, you go again later?
Yeah, exactly. We'll try and get out for the last 10-15 minutes this session, try and get some wet running in, and we'll see how we get on. We know we've got a quick car, we had a quick car in practice one. Just a shame about all the conditions were changing, and I just pushed too hard and made a mistake. One of those things, you know, we'll move on, and hopefully we'll have a good quali.
We hope to see you out, like you say, the last 15 minutes or so, but we'll keep an eye on the repairs and catch up with you later on. Thanks, Sam.
Yeah, thank you, mate.
Well, Sam Neary, the perpetually cheery Neary, usually, but as you can see, he's got plenty of reason to be a little bit grumpy at the moment, because that team have had a whole series of issues in free practice sessions this season. This was the second look that we've had at the fairly sizable incident that Sam had coming out of Lake Com. Given the ferocity of that impact with the tyre wall, they are very, very fortunate to have got away with relatively little damage, actually. As he said, cosmetic mainly. This is the car, remember, that had an off at Brands Hatch in free practice 2. They had a brake issue at Silverstone and went off in free practice 2. Then they had a brake disc explode last time out at Donington Park in, guess what, free practice 2. And now here at Spa, they're not even looking like they're going to get out on track during free practice 2 after an issue in the first practice session of the day. So we hope they can get the car fixed. They should go well here. They, remember, were our most recent winners when Richard and Sam Neary managed to pull off the impossible, quite frankly, starting 10th on the grid at Donington Park 2 weeks ago. They came from 10th to win it. Richard Neary went from 10th to 2nd in the very first corner of the race, taking advantage of a bit of an incident ahead of him, but also making some really good moves to cut through the pack. And as a result, they brought themselves right back into contention. Fastest at the moment, then, for what it's worth, in this the early stages of this free practice session is this car. Well, it was this car of Scott Malvern, but Jelmer Berman, back on the circuit now, is going quicker by 1.4 seconds. This will be the trend, I think, for the opening 10-15 minutes or so of the session, as the drivers out on track just start to get to grips with the conditions out there. I noticed an awful lot of the pro drivers have headed out on track to do these exploratory laps before handing over to the AMs, maybe in the hope that the rain is going to desist and maybe the track will dry. It looks like the rain has got a little lighter. It's been quite a persistent sort of heavier than a drizzle, but not quite pouring it down with rain, if you see what I mean. It's now a bit closer to drizzly weather, and hopefully that means that these cars, as they circulate around the track, might clear a bit of the standing water. Malvern looks like he's on an improvement here then. Not quite as quick as Berman, but personal best in the middle sector. And the car that started on the front row last time at Donington Park before running into mechanical issues late in the race goes through and does set a new personal best lap time, and almost does match Berman, actually, with a purple final sector there for Malvern. Faster than anybody else has gone so far in the session in that sector, and he's just 77 one-thousandths of a second now away from the top time. Two cars together here running in GT4. Matt Cowley at the wheel of the Ford Mustang. He's trying to find a way past the number 4 McLaren, which is being driven by Katie Milner. And Katie Milner in that number 4 car, well, none of the Rocket RJN McLarens really had a good time of it at Donington, nor, though, it must be said, with Matt Cowley, as they got tangled up with one of the McLarens. And with the Toyota as well, about 30 minutes into the race, all three of them out on the spot, so they'll, both of these cars, be looking for just a solid result, really, out of this race at Spa. And there you can see the difficulty with the spray. You might wonder why the Academy car of Matt Cowley is insisting on getting quite so close to Katie Milner. Two reasons. One, he clearly feels that he's quicker and wants to get through, but also this is quite a good simulation for potentially the start of the race tomorrow. If we have a wet race, you're going to have to run in the spray. You may as well get used to it, really. And he does now pull out of the spray into the braking zone so that he doesn't go careering into the back of the McLaren with pits. And now Matt Cowley can carry on onto another lap. Matt, at the moment, is the second fastest GT4 car. It's Scott McKenna once again, who is on his toes in the Toyota that is fastest in the session within the GT4 category. So let's ride on board then with Cowley as they head into the right-hander at La Source. Then carefully on the throttle, this Ford Mustang can be a bit leery under acceleration, accelerates away out of La Source, down past the old pits where there's a bit of resurfacing work being done in the paddock after the recent flooding, and then hold your breath, and hope for the best. Into Eau Rouge, then up the hill through Radion. Brilliant shot there as the car splashes its way through the most iconic sequence of corners, I think, in world motorsport. Bit sideways over the curbs, but then gets on the power. And here you can actually sort of relax, at least in the drive, because you're on the Kemmel Straight, you're climbing slowly uphill. I say slowly, you're going very quickly, but it's quite a gradual sort of climb, and then pick your braking point into Les Combes, which he did pretty nicely by the looks of it. There is the Ram Racing Mercedes in. Jelmer Berman will get out and hand over to Ian Loggie then. So as I said, these two have been very consistent this year. Missed out on the podium at Brands Hatch at the season opener. They finished 4th place at Brands Hatch, 3rd at Silverstone, 2nd at Donington. So by all rights, they should win tomorrow to keep that trend going. But that's going to be an awful lot easier said than done. Joint championship leaders, as I mentioned, with Andrew Howard and Johnny Adam. Just to finish that point I was making about Johnny earlier on, he will, we hope, return for the next rounds of the championship, but at Snetterton in a few weeks' time. A bit of a gap now, actually, before our next round of the championship, but Andrew Howard, provided he finishes and scores points this weekend, will then have more points than his own co-driver does. So Johnny Adam, if Andrew Howard does score points this weekend, Johnny Adam will not then be able to win the championship this year, but he'll still come back and help Andrew Howard. It's the driver that scores the points rather than the cars, if you see what I mean. And Johnny has been in that situation before. Phil Keane there on board the WPI Motorsport Lamborghini. Now, if ever there was a team that needed a good result, it was this one. They won the season opener at Brands Hatch, remember? Phil Keane and Mike Ligo after a really, really strong performance. But then Silverstone, they were strangely off the pace all weekend long. Then they went to Donington Park, where they stuck it, again, near the front of the grid. But Mike Ligo was tipped into a spin by Nick Jones in the Team Parker Racing Porsche at Redgate Corner. The Lamborghini went around, would have got away with it if it hadn't been for Dennis Lind, who, not for Dennis Lind, for Leo Machitsky, excuse me, the car he shares with Dennis Lind, who clattered into the side of Igo and unfortunately put both of the Lamborghinis, run by different outfits, of course. WPI Motorsport run this car, Barwell running the 63, but they were both out on the spot, and it meant that the early championship favourites, in a way, Keane and Igo, found themselves now down in 6th place in the championship. They're only 24 points off the top, though, with 37.5 points available for winning this weekend. So they can absolutely still get back into this. They just need to have a clean weekend. And Phil, I think, is acutely aware of that fact. Just needs to get through this weekend without anything else going wrong. But with these conditions at this... the weather at this circuit is going to be a little bit tricky to stay out of that trouble. So it is Phil Keane on board the car then, as we saw from that onboard shot. He's coming up through the final corner of the timing screen. Yes, he's saying it's Mike Ligo, but that is most definitely Phil Keane, who knows this place rather well. He's had success here in the past. He's gone quicker than anybody in that middle sector, so this might be a new fastest lap time of the session. Is it? He comes across the start-finish line now, past my commentary position, and yes, he goes quickest by about a tenth, just under a tenth and a half over Scott Mulvin second. Dennis Lind is third. This car is 4th quickest with the time set by Jelmer Berman. Ian Loggie is on his outlap now from the pit lane. So too Sandy Mitchell, who is 5th place. So Jelmer Berman then is out of the car, watching on as Ian Loggie works his way through the murk and the mist around Spa-Francorchamps, and Jelmer is down there in the pit lane with Bryn.
Yes, indeed he is. As you look at the car on screen, it looks quite nice out there. Jelmer, you're telling me that it's very greasy, it's not ideal, a bit of aquaplaning as well.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, generally in the corners it's pretty good. I guess because there's not so much rubber down, the grip is quite all right. So everywhere you go, if you go on the ideal line, on the wet line, grip level is actually pretty decent. But you know, there are some rivers here and there, especially when you enter Les Combes. It looks like it's all good on the entry, and then in the middle of the corner you got a big snap. So it's, you know, those are the tricky parts, and especially the straights, because first couple of laps I didn't manage to go flat on the straight because it was just aquaplaning. So it takes just a matter of time. You know, when the cars drive around, they clean a bit of water, and then it will get better.
So Ian's out in the car now. Is Ian going to stay in the car for the rest of this session?
I'm not sure yet. He's going to do some laps, see how it goes, and then maybe we're going to try something right at the end, and I'll jump back in. Depends on how things go, you know, with red flags and stuff like that. So see what happens.
The only thing I think is sure is the weather will stay like this in qualifying.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't have that much wet running yet in British GT this year, so I don't mind it, to be honest. It's a nice track, and even in the wet, in the dry, it's always a pleasure to drive here. So.
Jelmer, thank you.
Thanks.
Yes, it's been an unseasonably summery season so far for British GT over in the UK. Typically, as soon as we come for our annual holiday to Belgium, the Spa-Francorchamps weather system has come in to throw a bit of a spanner in the works. But he makes a valid point, does Jelmer, that there haven't been that many, well, there haven't been any fully wet practice qualifying or race sessions so far this year. So the teams are a little on the back foot here, you'd imagine, as they try to find the right setup. A lot of them, though, will have experience of running at this track, be it in this championship or GT World Challenge, for example, so they'll, I'm sure, be able to figure something out. But Ian Logie is coming through now, finally, to complete this out lap. It's going to be quite a long lap, that. Not such a long lap for Dennis Lind, who has now gone to the top in the 63 Lamborghini, deposes Phil Keane from the top spot by exactly 0.2 of a second. And Dennis Lind and Leo Machitsky, who again have yet to win this year, they've had a third and a second, and then that non-finish at Donington 2 weeks ago, looking maybe for their first victory here tomorrow. Out into the fray once again goes the McLaren there. That was the Proctors, Lewis and Stuart Proctor, father and son. And one of two father and son pairings racing in the championship, of course. The Nearys becoming the first ever father-son combo to win a round of the championship at Donington 2 weeks ago. Scott Mulvin has just had a slightly odd lap in the Porsche, the Team Parker Racing Porsche. He was faster than anyone else had gone in both sectors 1 and 2. Looked as though he was going to jump to the top of the times and then dived for the pit lane. So I don't know if there's an issue there for the Team Parker car. As we ride on board now with one of the cars staring at the footwell. This is Stuart Proctor then. They're heading up the Kemmel Straight, on the brakes now into Les Combes. And you've got to be really gentle there with the throttle and brake application. Very easy to snatch the brakes into the corners and spin up the rear wheels coming out. These GT3 cars, of course, have quite fancy ABS and traction control systems, but they still require a bit of effort from the driver to not make the mistake and not be a bit too heavy with the right foot, which, as you can see there from on board with Stuart, operates both the accelerator and the brake. No left foot braking there. But, it may be different, of course, for Lewis, his son, who is the pro driver. He perhaps may prefer the left foot braking technique, which, especially in the wet, can give you a bit more stability and a bit more control of the car under braking. But Stuart Proctor certainly using his right foot there for both pedals. Sandy Mitchell jumps up to 4th, incidentally, in GT3, whilst Darren Turner, who has also turned a few laps of this place throughout the years, has now gone fastest in GT4 in the 27 Newbridge Aston Martin. That is the Porsche. So as I said earlier on, he was on an absolutely flying lap and then bailed for the pit lane. There is there's no activity around the car at all, which could be seen as a bad thing, but the car hasn't been sent into the garage. So that's a good thing, I'm hoping. Maybe they're just waiting to see what the weather does. The rain's sort of intensified again now. Not a huge amount to gain, perhaps, for the rest of the session. And the last thing they want to do is join the list of teams that have had issues already and damaged cars. We've mentioned the Nearys. We did have a red flag in our first free practice session. That was for one of the new entries into the championship, actually, for this race, the Leiper Motorsport Lamborghini of Fidel Leib and Brendan Leitch. And that was a car we were really looking forward to seeing in the GT3 ranks. They had a shunt, though, and it looks as though they might not be back out for the rest of the day. Right, let's get to the bottom of why Scott Mulvin bailed on what was looking like the fastest lap of the session, Bryn.
Yeah, it was indeed. Currently second fastest at the moment, Andy, and I've just got Scott here, as you were saying, to be a chat to. Scott, you've parked up for a while now. Is there a reason why the car's parked up?
No, we're just sticking to the plan. The plan was always to do 3 or 4 laps, just to sort of get a benchmark for Nick to get in the car. We've just jumped out so that Nick can have a look at the video and we can just talk about a few bits and pieces that are out on circuit at the moment, you know, where the standing water is and what curves we can use and what ones we can't. But no, nothing unusual, just sticking to the plan.
With the weather like this, is there a rethink about the lap that Nick's going to be taking? Have you said to him you need to really avoid all the curves and have a bit of a pep talk with him?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's a big change from this morning with the dry conditions this morning. There was a lot of standing water out there in places, but the circuit is improving every lap. So, you know, we're the lap time is only ever going to improve every single time, every single lap we go around. I mean, I think there's a few guys now who've gone quicker as well. So, you know, the track's just improving all the time. The rain's not really heavy enough to sort of keep that standing water going all the time. There's cars going around pulling the water up. It's, you know, it's going to improve. So, you know, just talking to Nick about a few different points, places we want him to drive, braking points, where the rubber is, where it's slippery, you know, which curbs are slippery especially. You know, if there's a river just at the bottom of Eau Rouge, it's going to be a bit tricky sometimes. So, you know, just trying to give him some pointers just to, you know, help him along.
Yeah, now just finally, before Donington, I was talking to you about the car, and you were saying that we feel like we've got on top of it now and it's working really nicely. I was chatting to Nick a few minutes ago, and he said that really it was a case of not chasing the problems with the car and having to just change the way you drove it. Is that essentially the issue?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So obviously everyone, you know, Porsches are renowned for being a bit strange and a bit odd in the driving style. And it took a bit of time for us to adjust, and you know, we had Nick Tandy in the car helping us for a day, and we learned a lot from him. Obviously, such a wealth of experience with Porsches, you know. And once we sort of got that philosophy in our head, you know, it's been, you know, we've been sort of at the top of the timesheets where we kind of wanted to be, really.
Yeah, onwards and upwards, right? Onwards and upwards.
Exactly. Yeah.
Scott, thanks.
No worries.
So there you go then, Scott Mulvey not wanting to get ahead of himself, I think, maybe, and push too hard, chasing good lap times. Good to hear the Porsche, though, is working well. This car's working pretty well. Indeed, it's been working well all season, really. This is Scott McKenna at the wheel of the Toyota Gazoo Racing UK Toyota GR Supra GT4. Only 8th in the points, and they've only finished one race this season, but the race they did finish, they were on the podium at Silverstone, at the Silverstone 500, and this car has been quick at every single event, but for one reason or another, a bit like this team suffered with last year, really, they just can't quite piece it together and go after that first victory for the car in GT4. They are currently topping the GT4 rankings in this session by over a second, actually, over Chris Salkeld, who's just jumped up into second place. But the Toyota front-engine car should go well here at Spa. It looks a little leery, doesn't it, though, as it hits the brakes there into the right-left flick at Pif-Paf. And down into Campus then, and back up through Paul Frere towards the end of the lap. The car really lurching around under braking and under acceleration. You can see the GT4 cars with that little bit less downforce and aerodynamic grip. They're less powerful, yes, but the less grip they have is really affecting them, I think, in this session. A personal best there in the first sector for McKenna. That plus 3.29 seconds, I think, is compared to the fastest GT3 car, so you would sort of expect that to be the case. GT4 cars around here are slower than the GT3s, although not actually a huge amount. This car has done a 2-minute, its fastest lap was a 2-minute 50.265, about 11 seconds off Dennis Lind, who is fastest overall in GT3. So the wet weather is bringing the GT4s an awful lot closer to the GT3 pace, actually. Is this going to be a new fastest lap of the session in GT4, though? That's the next question. Across the start-finish line will go Scott McKenna, and it is a personal best. He's into the 49s now, 2:49.701. So the number 15 car extends its margin now at the top of the GT4 field. Car number 1 in the pit lane, and Sandy Mitchell currently shares with Adam Ballon. Last time we visited Spa-Francorchamps in 2019, you may remember this car ended up in the wall coming out of Blanchimont with Adam at the wheel, so he'll be hoping that he doesn't have a recurrence of that incident from 2 years ago. Car number 1, Sandy and Adam having a steady season so far, had the win in the Silverstone. Well, they finished second in the Silverstone 500, but the car that won the race, the 2Cs Motorsport Mercedes, didn't score points. So Sandy and Adam inherited the maximum points from that race. That puts them third in the championship, about 15 points off the top. So again, a good race for them here, could put them out in front. Haven't yet touched upon this car. This is the GTC entry. Good to have a GTC car back on the grid. It's being run by FF Corsa, who are, of course, a world-famous Ferrari specialist team. And the 99 car then, the Ferrari 488 Challenge car, shared by Omar Jackson, the AM, Charlie Hollings, who has raced in British GT in the past, the Pro. GTC sort of fits somewhere between GT3 and GT4, and it caters for these sort of one-make GT championship cars. So you get Porsche Super Cup cars, Ferrari Challenge cars, Lamborghini Super Trofeo cars. We had a whole handful of them out actually at the Silverstone 500 at the end of last year. From the exterior, it looks an awful lot like a GT3 car, but the lap times are a little off that pace. They have, again, less aerodynamics, less in the way of driver aids, because the whole point really of these cars that compete in one make series is to make the driver work for it and not let the car do the driving for them. So they're a bit of a handful, I'd imagine, in these conditions, and this car actually had for a period of the session been slower than, in fact still is slower than the fastest GT4 car. So I think Omar and Charlie still getting to grips with it, but great to have a GTC car back in. I've been saying for a while that we need to get more of them really, because if we could get 5 or 6 of them together for a full season, then they potentially could have their own class championship, and that would add extra spice to the mix and extra stories to be followed over the course of the season. So good to have them there. There is one of the 3 Rocket RJN GT4 McLarens that are here at Spa, but one of only 2 that we will see running, because unfortunately the other bit of misfortune that has befallen some of the teams this weekend is that the number 2 car, shared by Jordan Collard and James Kell, will not be racing. They had a sizable shunt yesterday, which I believe was at Blanchimont in the test session on the Friday afternoon, and that car too badly damaged to continue. So that and the Lippert Motorsport Lamborghini, unfortunately, out for the weekend. The Lippert car had an off this morning in practice, and I think I overheard a conversation earlier on between team manager and SRO personnel that the chassis had been damaged. They were looking to try and get some bits of the car recovered from out at Speaker's Corner, which is where it went off, which is not an uncommon place to have an accident, but certainly surprising to see that much damage into the car. But it was a pretty big hit, and sadly we won't see that particular Lamborghini out, or the sister car to this number 4 machine, which is currently being driven still, in fact, by Katie Milner. I think she's been in since the start. Just set her fastest lap of the session, a 2:54.387. This one of the 2 McLaren Driver Development Programme cars, DDP as they call it. And so Katie shares car number 4 with Harry Hayek, and then the number 3 car, Michael Benyaya and Alain Vallon, all coming through McLaren's sort of young driver programme essentially. And this is definitely going to be a good weekend to evaluate their abilities, because these really slippery conditions are going to test the drivers to the absolute maximum. And gets Scott McKenna out of the number 15 Toyota. Good afternoon's work so far. He's been in the car pretty much for the whole first half of the session, and will now hand over then to John Ferguson. That, remember, is a Pro-Am entry. Roughly a 50-50 split between Pro-Ams and Silver Cup entrants so far this season in GT4, although there are now only 3 Pro-Am GT4s left this weekend. So McKenna and Ferguson, one of them. Then the Matt Topham, Darren Turner shared Newbridge Motorsport Aston Martin, number 27. And the other Pro-Am entry is Mark Sanson in the Ginetta, number 56, the car that he shares with Charlie Robinson, all of the other GT4's Silver Cup entrants, which means they carry extra ballast, which won't affect them too much in the wet, but it does mean they have to spend extra time in the pit lane during their pit stop tomorrow, but we'll get to that at the time. There is the 27 car, actually, that I just mentioned, Matt Topham on board. Missed the season opener at Brands Hatch, this team. Then they came back at Silverstone and only went and won the blue ribboned event of the year, the Silverstone 500 in GT4. They won it by about 3.5 seconds over the Stella Motorsport Audi of Senna Fielding and Richard Williams, which arguably was the more impressive performance, actually, because that Audi was a Silver Cup car, had to spend an extra, I think it was 26 or 28 seconds in the pit lane at each of the 3 pit stops over that 3-hour race, and they still came out only 3 seconds behind this car. So, but nonetheless, Matt Topham on his debut in the championship managed to win, and Darren Turner not on his debut in the championship, but he amazingly had never won a round of the British GT Championship until then. So Darren Turner, with his wealth of experience in multiple categories of racing, but mainly GT racing with Aston Martin as a factory driver, where he's enjoyed a very, very healthy career, winning some of the big endurance races around the world. And Darren Turner had never won a British GT race, but that all changed at Silverstone. Sadly, though, this car was involved in one of the shunts in the early stages of Donington at McLean's. They got tangled up with a number of other cars, including the Assetto Motorsport Ginetta. Awful lot of damage was done, so quite nice actually to see this car here. It's only been 2 weeks since Donington. Quite a few teams had some repair work to be done, and they have by and large all got it done and got the cars out here to Belgium. So we are right on board then with Matt Topham, just negotiating one of the Rocket RJN McLarens that's just fresh from the pit lane into Eau Rouge, up through Raidillon. You can see the rain still lashing down on the windscreen. And we are seeing far fewer improvements in sector or lap times at the moment, so I do suspect that maybe the conditions are worsening once more. I think the rain is now coming down quicker than the cars can clear it from the surface of the track. Spa does have good drainage though. They have had the odd wet day here in Belgium, and so they made sure the track is capable of draining away quite nicely, and I'm hoping that means we won't see too much in the way of standing water. Here is the car then that finished second to the Aston Martin at Silverstone. Senan Fielding is at the wheel, slides the Stella Motorsport Audi R8 LNS GT4 into Pouhon. This devilishly quick left-hander, double apex left-hander, down at the lowest point of the circuit, and that car currently sits in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th in GT4 as it stands. So we're more than halfway through this practice session now then. This is another car we haven't yet seen much of in this session. It is a GT3 McLaren. It is the GT3 McLaren that is being run by Team Rocket RJN. I nearly said Balf Motorsport then. Team Rocket RJN, Mia Fluid and Ewan Hankey, who you'll remember raced in GT4 last year. They were one of the only Pro-Am entries in GT4 in 2020. They did manage to win a race overall though at the season opener at Alton Park, and of course became relatively unchallenged, admittedly, but they became the Pro-Am GT4 champions last year. They too missed the first round of the championship, but then came in partway through the season, and we believe that they are sticking around now for the foreseeable future. So, as I said, we're into the second half of the session then. It is the number 63 Barwell Motorsport Lamborghini that is fastest overall with a 2:39.525. Then it's the WPI Motorsport Lamborghini number 18 second, 3.5 tenths slower. They've got just over a tenth of a second in hand then over the 6016 Parker Racing Porsche, now in the hands of Nick Jones. The number 1 Barwell Lamborghini is 4th quickest, 6 tenths off the top. So all 3 of our Lamborghinis are inside the top 4 positions at a circuit that Lamborghinis haven't always excelled at, and in conditions, in fairness, that the Lamborghinis haven't always excelled in. So good to see that they've found a turn of pace so far this weekend. Then it's the 21 Rocket RJM McLaren that we just saw in the pit lane, Mia Fluid and Ewan Hankey 5th, 6th for Ian Loggy and Yelmer Berman for Ram Racing, 7th is number 5, the Proctor McLaren, 8th place for Andrew Howard and Ross Gunn in the Beechdean AMR Aston Martin, which is down there 5.4 seconds off the pace. I suspect they've not exactly been chasing lap times in this session. And then we get into the GT4s because Scott McKenna is 9th overall in that Toyota. Number 15 car top in GT4, rounding out the top 10 overall is the Charlie Hollings and Omar Jackson GTC Ferrari, 10th place overall for number 99. Second and third for what it's worth in GT4. Andrew Gordon-Colbrook, number 9, is second, and Gus Burton third. Now, there's been a change there as well, just quickly to mention, for Century Motorsport, because the Chris Salkeld Andrew Gordon-Colbrook car had previously been running in the Pro-Am category, but there's been a bit of a re-evaluation there of driver gradings, and so they've been moved up into the Silver Cup now, so that does change some of the championship situations in GT4, which we'll get into a bit more detail I'm sure later on in the weekend, but that car is running now in a different class, but the Century Motorsport BMWs have been on fire this weekend, and they've again got both of their cars at the moment inside the top 3 in GT4. The car that's rather slipped down the GT4 order is that Academy Mustang that was in the top 2 for most of the first half of the session. They are some way down now in about 6th place within the GT4 ranks. 25 minutes though still left on the clock. There's lots more circuit development that could be done here if the surface water does start to lessen again. Then we could see some improvements. We've got a bit of a mix, although mainly it is the AM drivers that seem to be out in the GT3 cars now. In fact, yes, there is not a exception to that. Every one of the GT3 cars being driven by the AM driver right now. So that seemed to be the way to go, didn't it? Send the pros out for the first half of the session in the hope that the track conditions would improve, set a benchmark for the AMs, and then send the AM cars out to the AM drivers, I should say, out to try and find their feet. As I said at the top of the session, ordinarily wet practice session, the team would be very, very reluctant to go out. They probably still are reluctant to go out, but given the forecast for tomorrow says that we could have a wet race, this is vital track time. They can learn an awful lot now from this session that might just help them tomorrow. And as this is a track that they don't get a chance to test at an awful lot as well, every lap that they can get is beneficial. If we were at Snetterton or Brands Hatch or Donington or something, chances are they'll have had a wet day at some point to go out, try a few things with the setup, get the drivers comfortable in the conditions. But Spa, especially at the moment, not the easiest place to come and test for a UK-based team. So they are probably going to be enjoying the fact they can get out there now and really get some testing in. Andrew Howard, by the way, has just set the purple first sector. So Andrew Howard now going quicker than anyone else has in sector 1. That's the number 7 Beach Dean AMR Aston Martin, joint championship leader, remember, with the number 6 car of Jelmer Berman and Ian Loggy. So Howard then is somewhere in the middle sector as we follow Leo Machitsky up the hill. He is not improving on this lap, but the number 63 Lamborghini at least is bringing a flash of colour to the rather grey afternoon here at Spa. And this car makes its way out of Blanchimont into the braking zone at the bus stop. They're all taking this really interesting line into the bus stop. I've noticed cars in other sessions doing this as well. So there is obviously either less standing water on the inside or more grip on the inside, because of course in the wet the traditional racing line is not always the fastest way around the circuit. The line on which all of the rubber has been laid down becomes quite slippery when it's wet, so it's sometimes better to, as you can see him doing again there into La Source, take a slightly odd line off the traditional line into and out of the corners to try and help your overall speed through the turn. This car has found plenty of overall speed. Andrew Howard is about to come through to the end of sector 2. His first one then, like I said, was a fastest of anybody. His second sector is a PB, so Andrew Howard is going quicker now in this car than Ross Gunn went in it in the first part of the session, which tells you that either Andrew is really fired up or that maybe the track is getting a bit quicker. Up towards Blanchimont he comes then, the shortest of the 3 sectors on the lap. The first sector is in the 44-45 second bracket. The second sector is over a minute, and the final sector will be probably somewhere around the 35-40 second mark. He again takes that tight line into the bus stop chicane, sacrifices the exit speed from the right hander to make sure you're on the right line for the left, then gasses it up, tries to control all of the horsepower, and across the start finish line he goes, and it's the new fastest lap time of the session, a 2:39.075. Meanwhile, this was the 42 Audi having a big old moment. Richard Williams is at the wheel now. That was down at Puon. That is not a nice place to suddenly find your car braking traction, and that's exactly what happened there. A bit too much speed into the first left, put him out on the painted curbs on the outside, and from there it was almost history, but he just about gathered it all together. So a terrific lap that then from Andrew Howard, a 2:39.075. Just to put that into some perspective though, before we get too excited, a dry lap time in session 1 this morning was a 2:19.4, so we're only 20 seconds off the times that were being set this morning. Michael Igoe, this looks like, yes it is, it's got his name on his helmet and everything. Michael Igoe heading up through Rouge, I should say, and Radion on a lap that is not an out lap. He's been out there for a while now, hasn't he? The previous lap was a 44, which wasn't terribly quick, but this one perhaps might be an improvement, although not in the first sector. But a card warned for track limits as well at turn 4, which is Radion. Card 4, the latest driver, Harry Hayek, being warned about that. A real snap of oversteer there for Michael Igoe as he tried to get the car to change direction. Les Combes is a really tricky sequence of corners. There's not a huge amount of grip there, especially in the wet. It's very flat. There's no real natural camber to the road. And then as you drop down into the right-hander here at Bruxelles, the again, that steep off-camber downhill braking zone makes it really difficult to find your braking point. We saw Jelmer Berman going off there earlier in the session. Michael Igoe, though, gathers it together. That is the Berman car, with Berman at the wheel, actually, behind him. Now, Jelmer Berman has just gone out of the pit lane. He's on an out lap, so that car is one to watch in the next 5 minutes or so to see if it improves. Lewis Proctor, the pro driver for number 5, is back out on track as well. So now as we get towards the end of the session, perhaps teams starting to think about qualifying, which is actually the sort of primary objective here in a way, because qualifying we're almost certain will be wet. The race tomorrow is up for debate, but qualifying coming up this afternoon is almost certainly going to be a wet session. So it is maybe time to start thinking about sticking a qualifying setup on the car, or what you think might become a qualifying setup, and see exactly what raw pace you can get, especially from your pros, of course, because although both the Pro and the AM have to qualify, there are 2 sessions for each class, remember. There's a GT3 and a GT4 session 1 and 2, so 4 sessions in total. Each driver of each car goes out for one of those sessions, so the combined times set the grid, but it's the pros that really know what they're looking for from a qualifying setup. They can really push the car to the limit a little bit more, and so the job seems to be falling to them here to try and get the car ready for qualifying. They've got 18 minutes left of the session. Ross Gunn is now back in that number 7 Aston Martin, we're being informed by the timing screen, although I didn't see it come into the pit lane. So was it Ross Gunn already in the car, perhaps? Not Andrew Howard. That is Ross. But was Ross in the car 5 minutes ago? I think he must have been, and he's gone quicker again now in the first sector. So this does now make a little more sense that Ross Gunn, the pro entry for this team, is the one setting the electrifying pace. He's already done a 39.0. There is the confirmation that it's Ross in the car. He runs wide through the right-hander at Brussels. You can do that, though. Take an early apex, run wide in the middle, and sort of make a V-shape with the late apex. Gives you, propels you sort of down the hill then into Speaker's Corner a little bit more quickly. And the Aston Martin then does now start to thunder along down the hill into Pau on the lowest part of the circuit now. And it looks and sounds incredible. It makes it almost worth being stood out in the rain to hear, I would imagine. Then up towards Piff Paff he goes again. Now the middle sector, as I said, is the longest, so this really is where you can make or break a lap. And Ross Gunn still has another couple of corners to go in this middle sector. We're getting personal bests from Berman and Lewis Proctor, who I said were out in their respective cars as well. That's numbers 6 and 5, but not quite as fast. Berman is half a second off what Ross Gunn has done in the first sector this time. Right, middle sector for Gunn is another PB, so this is going to move the goalposts, I think, in this second free practice session. His current fastest lap, 39.0. And as he now heads up through Blanchimont, then full commitment required even in the wet. Stay off those curbs on the exit though, because that can and will spell disaster. And then again takes this interesting line, not quite as tight as some other cars have gone there into the right-hand element of the bus stop. Oh, and he bails for the pit lane. That's disappointing. Maybe not wanting to show their hand, who knows, but Ross Gunn, I think, has proved his point there, really, hasn't he? Gone 4.5 tenths quicker than Dennis Lind managed in this car, which Leo Machitsky is at the wheel of for the time being. Again, that really tight line into Brussels, but this time he does outbrake himself a touch. Almost runs off the road, just about manages to avoid doing that. But his first sector, not that impressive. Jelmer Berman is on a good lap, though, here. I said he had a personal best in the first sector. His second sector, likewise, is green. He's about 3/4 of a second slower than Ross Gunn is going, though, but it might just put him into the top 3 or 4 this lap for Jelmer Berman. He's crossing the line now, and it's not quite. It's 5th fastest for the number 6 Mercedes. There it goes into La Source. And so Jelmer Berman, personal best in all sectors, though, and that was his first effort. It was his first flying lap in this part of the session. They haven't given Ian Loggy that many laps, have they? Because I think Berman went out at the start. Well, he did, didn't he? I remember. And then they put Loggy in for maybe only 10-15 minutes in the middle, and now Jelmer going back out again. So they clearly are chasing, I would say, setup here, and so having the pro in the car is the best way to do that. Now, lots of traffic here at the Kemmel Straight. You'll get a slipstream from it, but it'll also potentially get held up by it. The Academy Mustang looks like the next one to be negotiated. There's McLaren, I think, somewhere in the spray as well. Oh, Berman's really had to back off, I think, there as he turns into Lake Como. Actually, maybe not. He might have cleared the McLaren. Oh, and around goes the Mustang right in front of Jelmer Berman. A brilliant avoidance there from Jelmer. That's Will Moore in the Academy Motorsport Ford Mustang with a 360-degree loop right in front of the number 6 Mercedes. That could have been a really unfortunate incident for both of these teams. Academy have had to rebuild this car already after Donington, of course, where it sustained quite a lot of front-end damage. Thankfully, they avoided damaging the car there, but that will have caught Will Moore's attention. It will definitely have caught Jelmer Berman's attention, and it will also certainly have slowed Jelmer down, so don't expect this to be an improvement for Berman. So we've got 17 cars still out on circuit. The cars that are the drivers that are highlighted in red on your timing tower, they're cars that are in the pit lane. So Ross Gunn in the number 7 Aston Martin, Richard Williams in the 42 Audi are both in the pits. Everybody else, though, trying to really maximise their track time in this qualifying session. The rain is really coming down heavily again now too, so although we've just had a bit of a flurry of activity, it might be tricky for the drivers to improve. There's the moment, just looks like he carried a bit too much speed, maybe he was on the wrong line into the left-hander. If you overshoot the right at the start of Lacombe, it can put you at all 6s and 7s through the middle part as well. Couldn't see from that angle whether he hit the curve, which certainly would have helped him. Would have helped him around, but not helped him keep control of the car. No damage done, thank goodness. That was a bit of a heart-stopping moment, that, for Will and Jelmer. Scott Mulvern is out in the session now. The Team Parker Racing Porsche has just pitted for a driver change. Omar Jackson has jumped into the GTC Ferrari, which is now up to 9th place. It is now quicker than the GT4 field. That's the Audi. Now, what are they doing to that left front corner? Have they had a tyre change here? They are limited on the number of tyres they can run, but wet tyres in particular sometimes need a bit of scrubbing in to really find their true performance. I think that is a fresh tyre, isn't it? So I think they may have changed tyres on the Stella Motorsport Audi, which had an issue at Donington. I'm trying to remember. I think it was electrical, I remember Sennan Fielding saying. There was that much that happened in the first half an hour at Donington. It's all a bit of a blur, but I think it was an electrical issue for the car when Richard was at the wheel, which was a shame because they were coming off the back of that strong Silverstone result and were looking pretty handy at Donington too. So that unfortunately leaves them now some way down in the GT4 Championship. Well, they're third in the standings, I should say. It's not that far down, but almost over 50 points off the championship leader. The championship leader in GT4 is this car, number 57, Will Burns, at the wheel at the moment, the car that he shares with Gus Burton. We've had 3 races this year. They've won 2 of them in GT4. They won Brands Hatch. They looked like they had the speed to win at Silverstone, but the success penalty for their win at round 1 unfortunately counted them out of the reckoning, despite a pretty funky strategy that Century tried with this car, well, with both of their cars actually. But then they bounced back success penalty free at Donington Park 2 weeks ago to take their second victory from 3 races, and it was the second 1-2 finish for Century Motorsport, who lock out the top 2 positions in the GT4 Championship standings. Right then, that is not Michael Igoe, that is Phil Keane, who's back on board. They're keeping us on our toes, these two, by doing multiple driver changes. This is the second stint, I think, that Phil will have done in this session, and this, to me, looks like it's going to be another mock qualifying run because there are 11 minutes left. It looks as though they're changing tyres. They're going to try and send the car back out. Yes, look at that, a bit of tape over the grille. Now that's interesting. I didn't know that was something that we would see in GT racing, but a little bit of tape over the grille can really help your front downforce. It gives you a bit more front downforce and it gives you a bit more straight line speed, but the car, we believe, is actually running a bit too cool as well, so it is to try and control the engine temperature primarily, but as a secondary effect to that, could give them a little bit more top speed. But yes, engine cooling then seems to be the main reason for the tape going over the nose. That is not a problem that you usually have. It's normally engines running too hot that becomes the issue, but in the wet, wild conditions here at Spa, quite the opposite is the case. So back out then goes the Lamborghini, and we have had a new time set by Jelmer Berman. This doesn't happen that often. It is exactly the same lap time. Oh, I'll get back to that in a second, because that's the number 9 of Andrew Gordon-Colebrook behind the barriers. Whereabouts even is that? Maybe down at campus. We'll get confirmation of that in a moment. But anyway, that car looks like it's pulled off behind the barriers, and that is not good news then for the car that is second in the GT4 category. That's the outside of Pouon, actually, isn't it? So I stand corrected. And now the camera zooms out to show us that. That is Pouon on the left of the screen. So that is potential drama, because there's only a couple of hours now between this practice session being completed and qualifying starting. Qualifying is due to get underway this afternoon. Well, actually, no, it's 5:20, isn't it? So they've got 3 hours probably to get the problem sorted. But of course, they've got to get the car recovered first, back in the garage, assess what the issue is, diagnose it, and then go about fixing it. Right, the point that I was about to make is that Jelmer Berman has now gone faster than that car has gone so far this session. A 2 minutes 39.075 is exactly the same lap time as was set by Ross Gunn earlier on. So the top 2 cars in the session, numbers 7 and 6, have set identical lap times to the nearest thousandth of a second, which does not happen that often, especially around a lap time that is nearly 2 minutes and 40 seconds in length in these conditions. That is remarkable. So, although Berman is now going quicker again, it must be said, with a personal best in the first sector. This is the Omar Jackson-driven FF Corsa GTC Ferrari, and that is the number 66 Porsche in the barriers. Scott Mulvin has gone off, and that is a lot of damage by the looks of it that's been done to the right-hand side of the 66 Porsche. That looks like Radeon. We'll zoom out. Yes, it is. It's at the top of the hill through Radeon, and the Porsche has been binned, and the red flag is out. So that is not good news for Team Parker Racing, because that's an even bigger repair job that's going to have to be done for them than any of the other teams that have run into difficulties. Certainly in this session, that looks like it's even more damage than Team ABBA Racing were dealing with on their Mercedes. And with 8 minutes left, less than that now, in the session, the red flag is out. I don't think we're going to get this session resumed, because the practice session protocol is that during a red flag, the clock continues to count down. It's not like a race or sometimes a qualifying session where you will see the time stop and the session restart again. I think this might be it. It's a shame for Jelmer Berman, because he was about to set a new fastest lap of the session and break that stranglehold, because he'd gone green in the first sector, personal best, purple in the second sector, which was faster than anyone. And it looked as though he was going to go to the top, but that now may not happen. So, the 66 Porsche then, how bad's the damage? That's the big question that the team will be asking themselves. They'll be trying to get a good view of the car so that they can see exactly what the repair job is going to be. But what a shame. They are slowly but surely getting to grips with that car. It was a big change for Team Parker Racing. You know, they've run Porsches an awful lot in the past, but in more recent years in British GT, it was the Bentley Continental GT3 that they were running. That is good news. That's Scott Mulvin out of the car. So he looks okay. And he loses it early. Is there a bit of standing water maybe? He goes backwards into the barriers. Boom! That is a big rear hit. And of course, the Porsche is rear-engined. So you don't want to hit any part of the car into a solid object, but if there is a bit of it you want to keep pristine, it's the back, because that could have done an awful lot of internal damage. And that is a real unfortunate way to end the practice session then, on the whole, but for them in particular. But yeah, as I was saying, the shift from Bentley to Porsche, I think it's fair to say, gave Team Parker Racing a little bit of a headache as they tried to figure out exactly what made the car tick. And they sort of made some progress at Silverstone. Then at Donington they really did, and they stuck it on the front row, like I said, had that bit of contact with Michael Igo at the start, did Nick Jones, but then settled in quite nicely, where technical issues then forced Scott Mulvin out of the race late on. So they've certainly not had a trouble-free season so far, and the 66 Porsche looked as though maybe this circuit, at which Porsche have had quite a lot of success in recent years, in particular in the 24 hours, and the wet conditions, which might have helped the rear-engine car as well. Good traction, of course, for that car, which will help them in the wet. Unfortunately, we might not see a lot more of as the sun now makes an appearance. Words I didn't necessarily expect to be saying today, but the weather is actually looking quite nice now. The rain, it's still hammering down with rain, don't get me wrong, but the sun is starting to make an appearance now through the clouds. If the rain stops now, we could get a dry trap by qualifying, but, well, I won't hold my breath. That's the Gordon Colebrook car, as I said, moved up into the Silver Cup now in GT4. So that's another one to chase between now and qualifying. Quite a few stories to go and find out from the paddock as we try and figure out just what the various problems are. Some of them more obvious than others, clearly. Those that have damage in a way, it's easier for the teams that way. If the car's crashed, they can just look at the things that are broken and replace them if they've got the parts. But when it's a mechanical issue, especially with a modern-day racing car where so much of the performance comes from electronics, and you have to plug the laptop in and run a electronics diagnostic, see if you can find the issue, that can just be an awful lot more time-consuming. And these BMWs have been pretty bulletproof so far this season, so of all the cars to have issues, this is a particular surprise. So, 3 3/4 minutes to go. I don't think we're going to get this session going anytime soon, are we? Ross Gunn then and Andrew Howard look like they're going to share the practice, the top time in practice, with Jelmer Berman and Ian Logie. I don't know if that's ever happened before. That we've had qualifying sessions, haven't we? In fact, I think as recently as last year we had a qualifying session, an individual qualifying session, where the lap times were identical or near identical, but it's surprising how often this happens around such a long lap, though. That is remarkable stuff, and bodes well for the 2 hours of racing tomorrow. So 7 and 6 the top two, with Leo Machitsky and Dennis Lynn, number 63, third fastest. In GT4 it is John Ferguson and Scott McKenna. McKenna, who set the time, fastest in the Toyota GR Supra from 57 Century Motorsport BMW of Will Burns and Gus Burton, and the number 9 car stopped out on circuit, but they did set the third fastest time in the session before that point. Slowest in GT4 was the number 90 McLaren, the Balk Motorsport McLaren of Jack Brown and Ashley Marshall, who retired last time out at Donington. So, with a session resumption highly unlikely, these are provisionally your results from free practice 2 of the Intelligent Money British GT Championship from Spa-Francorchamps. Ross Gunn and Andrew Howard, Jelmer Berman and Ian Logie, identical lap times between those cars, so they share the top spot with Machitsky and Lynn third. Igo and Keane fourth for WPI Motorsport, and Scott Mulvin, before he binned it into the barriers, fifth fastest in the Porsche that he shares with Nick Jones. Let's hope we get that car back out again later this weekend. Adam Ballon and Sandy Mitchell slipped out of the top 5 towards the end. They're 6th fastest, ahead of Mia Fluitt and Ewan Hankey, 14 Rocket RJN in the McLaren. Another McLaren next, Stewart and Lewis Proctor for Balk Motorsport, with Omar Jackson and Charlie Hollings, the only GTC car here, squeaking into 9th place overall. Then in GT4, it's the Toyota of Ferguson and McKenna, followed by the BMW of Burns and Burton. The gap between those two, 1.6 seconds. Completely different story to that in GT3. The other BMW of Gordon Colebrook and Salkeld with their mystery issue are third, ahead of Silverstone winners Matt Topham and Darren Turner's Aston Martin. Richard Williams and Senan Fielding survived an off at Pouon to go 5th fastest, ahead of the Ginetta of Mark Sansom and Charlie Robertson. Ginetta have traditionally struggled here at Spa because of the reliance on top speed, which hasn't always been that car's forte, but in the wet conditions they might just be able to scrape through for a slightly better result. Then it was Matt Cowley and Will Moore in the 61 Ford Mustang, followed by the 2 RJN GT4 McLarens there, Alan Volant and Michael Ben-Yair, 17th fastest overall. Harry Hayek and Katie Milner were 18th, and Jack Brown and Ashley Marshall unfortunately round out not a great session there for GT4 McLarens. We've lost one already in the shape of the number 2 car in testing yesterday, and then the 3 remaining GT4 McLarens unfortunately propping up the timing sheets. So a dramatic practice session then that sees the Porsche of Scott Mulvin in the barriers, the BMW of Andrew Gordon Colebrook pulling off at the side of the road. We hope, though, that we will get at least the Team ABBA Racing Mercedes back out for qualifying a little bit later on. We also hope that you'll join us for that qualifying session, which is due to take place at around 5:20 local time here at Spa for the 4 qualifying sessions that will set the grid for the 2-hour race tomorrow. With the sun shining and the rain easing, let's hope it's a slightly drier Spa-Francorchamps circuit. We'll see you again later on this afternoon.